Martha and to Kat for absolutely inspirational speeches. What a fantastic sight I'm looking out at just now. This is a phenomenal turnout for the launch of Yes Glasgow. It's phenomenal, firstly in terms of the sheer size of it, the sheer numbers of you that have turned out tonight to say a big resounding yes. Now, I don't think we should start off getting too competitive amongst ourselves in Yes Scotland, but let me say quite clearly and quite simply, I think it's fantastic that Yes Glasgow has been the biggest and best launch in the world. This turnout tonight is special for another reason, not just for its size. It's special because of the makeup of the audience in this room right now. I look out here and I see faces of people that I've known for years, too many years than we would care to remember. People I've campaigned with down the years. But I also look out tonight and see people that I don't yet know. Lots of people that I'm seeing and meeting tonight for the first time. People that I hope I will campaign with over these next 21 months for a yes victory in the referendum. There are people here tonight, as we've heard, from many political parties. There are people here tonight, I'm sure, from no political party. We don't agree on absolutely everything. There's nothing wrong with that. Scotland is a democracy and will be a better democracy when we are independent. But the one thing we agree about is that we only get to make these choices about our future if we are independent. We must be independent. We probably couldn't have picked a more appropriate date to have the launch of Yes Glasgow. Today, Westminster will pass the order transferring power to the Scottish Parliament to hold the independence referendum. And let me say, anybody still harbouring any doubts about whether Scotland would be better off independent would only have had to look in to the farce of a debate this afternoon, contributed to by people like Lord Forsyth, people in an unelected chamber, moaning about the transfer of power to the democratically elected Scottish Parliament. There's another reason why today is a very appropriate day to be meeting here in Glasgow. Today, the 16th of January, is the anniversary of the day in 1707 when the old Scottish Parliament ratified the Treaty of Union. Now, can you imagine our current Scottish Parliament today being asked to do that? If we were independent, being asked to ratify a treaty that handed over power to a parliament hundreds of miles away in which our voice was barely heard, to ratify a treaty that would see us hand over our resources, our vast resources, for another parliament to decide how much or how little of that we got back, to ratify a treaty that would put weapons of mass destruction on the River Clyde. That would be laughed out of the Scottish Parliament if it was a proposition today. So if we won't vote today for a system of government that wouldn't serve us well, why should we vote in 2014 to continue that system of government? In 2 years' time, it won't be an unelected House of Lords, it won't be a Parliament of any description that decides Scotland's future. Our future will be decided by the people of Scotland, and that's how it should be. And I'm going to make a prediction to you this evening, and I make this prediction not out of complacency, not out of a sense of bravado and wanting to impress you. I make this prediction because I believe our case is overwhelming, it is compelling, it is powerful, and it is right, and that prediction is we will win. Firstly, the democratic case for independence. You know, I'm fed up with Scotland getting Tory governments that we don't vote for. In my entire life, not once has Scotland voted for a Tory government. Not once in my entire life has Scotland returned a majority of Tory MPs or a majority of votes for the Tories, and yet for more than half of my life, Scotland has been governed by the Tories. That is not democratically acceptable, and independence will mean that we always get the government we vote for. That's so much more than abstract principle. That democracy matters. You know, last week, in the House of Commons, the vast majority of Scottish MPs voted against welfare changes that will penalise the poorest in our society, that will make disabled people poorer, that will make hundreds of thousands of households, many of them working hard each and every day, poorer than they are. The vast majority of our MPs voted against those changes. The vast majority, with one exception, I hasten to add. Alistair Darling, the leader of the Better Together campaign, instead of turning up in the House of Commons to vote against Tory welfare changes, was in Scotland scaremongering about independence. That was shameful. Will be imposed by Westminster. Friends, that is not acceptable, and that is what independence will change. So we will make that democratic case for independence, and we'll make the social case too, the case for fairness. I want to live in a country where wealth is created, yes, but where it's shared more equally too. I don't think we should settle for a situation where we're as rich as we are, rich in talent and skills and ingenuity, rich in natural resources, and yet we are, as Blair said earlier on, the fourth most unequal society in the developed world. I don't believe we should settle for that. I believe we should take the powers over tax and benefits, to allow us here in Scotland to create the fairer society that we want. So we will make that case for fairness too. We'll make the economic case. You know, over the past number of years, our long-term economic growth rate has been something like 40% lower than equivalent small independent countries. What's the no side's reaction to that? They mock those successful small independent countries, and yet many, if not all of them, are richer than Scotland is. Ireland, small independent Ireland, currently the President of the European Union. So we will make the democratic case, we will make the fairness case, we will make the economic case, and friends, we'll make the principled case as well. We should not be forced to spend money on weapons of mass destruction that the people of Scotland do not want and the world does not need. I've campaigned for independence since I was 16 years old. That's 5 years ago now. Get into it. I've campaigned since I was 16 years old. Many of you have campaigned a lot longer than I have. Many of you have joined more recently. There are many friends and colleagues of mine that are no longer here to take part in what we are privileged to be taking part in today. And it's that sense of privilege that motivates me every single day. You know, we are the lucky generation, because it is our generation of Scots that has the chance to make and to win the case for our country's independence. And in that date, yet to be announced, in 2014, when we put our crosses on the ballot paper, we will be doing so much more than just choosing between yes and no. We'll be taking the chance into our own hands to imagine and then to build the kind of country we want Scotland to be. What a rare opportunity and privilege to have. And everyone in Scotland, every single person in Scotland has a stake in this debate and in this decision. You know, one of my colleagues, late colleagues, Bashir Ahmed, one of the people that I so deeply regret is not here to take this journey with us, because he would so love to be here. He would have set himself a personal challenge to convert every single person in Scotland single-handedly. But Bashir uttered that wonderful phrase, it's not where you come from that matters, it's where we are all going together. And over these next 2 years, let's make clear to everybody in Scotland, where you come from does not matter. If you live in Scotland, if you care about the life you have here in Scotland, then it matters that you make this choice. You know, I'm as proud a Scot as it's possible to be, but I don't think it matters if you feel Scottish, British, Pakistani, Irish, Indian, whatever. That's not what this is about. We're not asking people to choose a flag or a national identity. We're asking people to think about the kind of country they want Scotland to be and how best we achieve it. That is the undemocratic, remote Westminster system of government that is presiding over low growth and a widening gap between the rich and the poor? Or is it putting decisions in the hands of our own Parliament, a Parliament that will make mistakes and not always get it right, but a Parliament that is more likely to get it right, and a Parliament that is more easy to hold to account when it doesn't? That's the choice we're asking people to make. So friends, let's leave this room tonight full of determination, excitement about what lies ahead. Ours will be a positive campaign, it will be an uplifting campaign. We will be met by relentless and unremitting negativity from our opponents. Make no mistake, sometimes though that negativity can be helpful. You know, a couple of weeks ago, so desperate were they to attack, so desperate were they to show wrongly that our figures were wrong, that £500 per person better off was actually £1 per person worse off, that they managed to concede that Scotland, at worst, will be no worse off independent. Well, I don't agree with their figures, but I'll pay my pound to get rid of Trident, to get opportunity. So I'm going to leave you with a question, and I want you to answer it in resounding one-word fashion. Are we going to do it?
Yes!
Thank you, Nicola, for that great speech. And she reminded me, if anyone else in the hall, and I hope that answers again yes to this, would like to give a pound for Scotland, there are appropriately sized buckets outside, which you'll need later on. Also, if you feel like contributing towards 10 years of independence, don't feel at all embarrassed about doing that. Please do feel free. Our last speaker tonight, I think, is one of the most authentic and well-liked and most respected politicians of my lifetime in Scotland. Now, we've been holding Yes Scotland events all around the country, and he always gets a terrific reception wherever he goes and wherever we go. So for our last speaker tonight, would you please welcome the chair of the Yes Scotland Advisory Board, and I know a friend of us all here tonight, Mr Deniss Canavan.
Thank you, Blair, for your kind words of introduction. I'd like to begin tonight with a wee story about a personal journey, or rather various personal journeys. This venue is just along the road from Glasgow Central Station. Way back in the 1970s, quite often on a Friday morning, I would get off the London sleeper very early in the morning, and I always found that the term British Rail sleeper for me was a misnomer because I couldn't sleep on them. And I used to feel like, oh dear, I think I'll just walk along to Queen Street, get another train and get home to my bed. However, there was often missionary work to be done. Not just in my own constituency, but I would regularly receive invitations from the students in Glasgow University Labour Club to go along and speak to them. And the Glasgow University Labour Club at that time considered themselves to be a very radical outfit, very anti-establishment, in fact, a very left-wing. In fact, they were so anti-establishment and so radical and so left-wing that they wouldn't even participate in the debates with the other students. This was apparently a reaction to a previous era of Labour politicians who had graduated from Glasgow University in the 50s and 60s, including the late John Smith and Donald Dewar. And because Donald Dewar and John Smith used to get dressed up in a suit and a bow tie and take part in the debates, and they usually won the debates, by the way. They won great competitions in these days, but the students of the 60s and 70s reacted against this and said they wanted nothing to do with these establishment debates. And the Prime Minister at the time was Harold Wilson. Harold Wilson was described by many of them as a class traitor who had sold the working class down the river, and the students too, because the poor students weren't getting grants that were kept up with inflation, despite the fact that inflation was running about 25%. And the student grant, the average student grant at that time wasn't much below the average manual worker's wage. So anyway, to be fair, I mean, they gave me a hard time because they thought that I was part of the establishment too. You know, I was a young Labour MP at the time. But to be fair, they didn't just campaign for themselves. They campaigned to save the welfare state. They campaigned to save jobs in industries such as coal and steel and shipbuilding. They campaigned against nuclear weapons. And as I said, they campaigned against the establishment of the day. Now, fast forward, I see some of the erstwhile student revolutionaries have joined the establishment, and some of them indeed have become parliamentary representatives for this great city of Glasgow. I see one Joanne Lamont, who is leader of the Scottish Labour Party. I see Margaret Curran, who is Shadow Secretary of State for Scotland. I see Ian Davidson, who chairs the Scottish Affairs Select Committee in the House of Commons. Ian was a student at Jordan Hill way back in the 1970s. When I look at that, I wish the heck I'd maybe gone home to my bed. I honestly never thought I would live to see the day when these erstwhile student revolutionaries would become so much part of the establishment that they would wrap themselves in the Union Jack, climb into bed with the Tories, and try to defend the indefensible Union. The traditional role of the Labour Party, the reason why the Labour Party was founded was to try to defend the working class. Now we have Labour politicians going around spending more time and energy defending an indefensible union instead of defending the working class. So yes, they've come a long way. I suppose they might say the same about me, except that my personal path had a different destination. I'm a convert, a self-confessed convert to the cause of independence, and my conversion is not based on emotion. It's based on my experience, mainly my parliamentary experience of 26 years at Westminster, 8 years in the Scottish Parliament, and I've been retired now for over 5 years, and I've had time to reflect, time to think about some of the things that happened during these years of my parliamentary service, and some of the big events that took place in Scotland and the rest of the world. And I have come to the conclusion that Westminster is completely out of touch with the people of Scotland. The Scottish Parliament, on the other hand, I mean, it's not perfect. I mean, it's a human organisation, it consists of human beings, and it sometimes makes mistakes. But I think that the Scottish Parliament has shown that it can respond far more positively and far more readily to the needs and the aspirations of the people of Scotland on things like, I think that Nicola mentioned some of them before, on things like land reform. I think that the Land Reform Scotland Act of 2003 was one of the most radical pieces of legislation passed by the Scottish Parliament, and Westminster never ever had the time to pass that kind of legislation. I can think of the abolition of the tuition fees which had been introduced by Westminster. I can think of the restoration of free prescriptions, and of course free care for the elderly. And I sincerely believe that if the Scottish Parliament had the full powers of an independent Parliament in an independent Scotland, then it would be able to do so much more. I also believe that independence is absolutely essential now for the defence of the welfare state against Westminster politicians who are increasingly out of touch with the needs of the people of Scotland. Last week, for example, we had the spectacle of MPs voting to decrease in real terms the benefits for some of the poorest people in society. And yet at the same time, many of those same MPs were clamouring for a 32% increase in their own salaries, which became if that ever sees the light of day, it would mean that they were pocketing £90,000 per year, while at the same time voting to cut the benefits of the poor. I mean, that is obscene in anybody's language, and I couldn't see any Scottish Parliament or any Scottish government in an independent Scotland putting up with that. And very sadly, the opposition at Westminster offers no real alternative, and leading Labour politicians even question the universal benefits which have been introduced by the Scottish Parliament, such as the restoration of free prescriptions, the abolition of tuition fees, and the provision of free care for the elderly. A something-for-nothing society, they shriek, giving out sweeties to the people of Scotland to try and get their votes. What an insult! I mean, is free education a sweetie? Is a free national health service a sweetie? I mean, Nye Bevan and Barbara Castle must be burning in their graves. Nye Bevan saw a free national health service as a hallmark of a fair society. And it was Barbara Castle who, back in the 1970s, defended universal benefits. All this argument and debate that's going on just now about whether universal benefits is the best way to distribute wealth. There's nothing new in this argument. There's no need for these people to have a review. Barbara Castle answered them away back in the 1970s when she was asked, why should the children of the rich people get child benefit? And she said that if a universal child benefit is combined with a progressive system of taxation whereby the rich pay more in tax and the poor pay less or none at all, then that will bring about the redistribution of wealth which fair people want to see. And if the current generation of Westminster politicians are unwilling to do that, then in all honesty, they should hand over all the responsibility for benefits and all the responsibility for taxation within Scotland to the Scottish Parliament and the Scottish Government. Because I'm sure that in an independent Scotland, a Scottish Government and a Scottish Parliament will respond far more readily, far more positively to the needs of the people of Scotland, including the need for greater standards of social justice. So I don't see independence as an end in itself. I see it as a means towards bringing about changes in Scotland, including higher standards of social justice. And it's not just the achievement of a fairer Scotland that independence could bring, it is also the achievement of a safer, more secure Scotland. Reference has been made by other speakers about us being dragged in the fairly recent past into illegal wars. And the reference has been made to the existence of the biggest nuclear arsenal in Western Europe, just about half an hour's drive from where you're sitting. An independent Scottish Parliament would be able to take decisions on whether or not we are engaged in war, and an independent Scottish Parliament would also be able to take decisions to rid Scotland of nuclear weapons, help to bring about a nuclear-free Scotland, a contribution to a nuclear-free Britain, a nuclear-free Europe, and a nuclear-free world. So, as I say, I feel that independence would help to bring about a fairer Scotland, a more secure Scotland, I also think it would help to bring about a more secure world. I mean, I must confess that I am not a nationalist. I mean, I appreciate that many of you are, and I respect you for that. But I prefer the description internationalist, and I want to see an independent Scotland playing a full role in the international community. So it's not a case of Scotland becoming some kind of little backwater remote from the rest of the world. I want to see us continuing to have close relationships with our nearest neighbours as equal partners in that relationship. I also want to see us having good working relationships with the rest of Europe and the rest of the world, and playing a full part in the international community in order to try to bring about a better and a fairer world. So just to finish, I want to comment on a question which I think must be going through some of your minds anyway. What are our chances of success in this campaign? Well, if we are to believe most of the recent opinion polls, it would appear that at this stage only a minority of people in Scotland are supporting us in this campaign. But you know, I think that even the recent opinion polls give some grounds for optimism, because if we look at the trend over the past 6 months or so, there's a significant number of people who are moving from the firm no camp into the undecided camp. And it's these people that we must target. I mean, there are hundreds of thousands of people out there who have yet to make up their minds. And we, in this campaign, have got to get out there and win the hearts and minds of these people. We have the potential to be the biggest community-based campaign that Scotland has ever seen. And we must aim to get out there and campaign throughout Scotland, in every city, every town, every village, every street, every home, every workplace. Get that positive message across that it's only in an independent Scotland that we will get the government that we vote for. And it's only through independence that the people of Scotland will be able to shape their own future. That is the positive message we must get across to the people of Scotland. And if we get that message across, we shall win a historic victory. So let's go for it!
Thank you very much, Deniss, for that very inspiring address tonight, and thank you indeed to all of tonight's speakers. To pick up on Dennis's last theme there, I've been saying since I started in this job, what we need to do to win is, if every person who's already decided to vote yes can persuade just one other person, one undecided person, by the time you get to the day of the referendum, then we win. So your job is, among other things, persuade just one other person, and we'll be over that finishing line in October 2014. A couple of things, bits of information I'd like to share with you or pass on to you before we wind things up tonight. Those participation sheets, please, when you leave tonight, hand them over to some of the Yes volunteers who you'll see in Yes t-shirts outside the hall. You can also, you'll see there are stalls representing each of the wards in Glasgow, and go to those stalls and talk to the people in those local areas about campaigns in those areas. There are stalls for groups within the broader Yes campaign: Yes Youth and Students, Women for Independence, Labour for Independence, trade unionists for independence, and there's a radical independence stall. There's yes merchandise out there you can buy as well. Now, ladies and gentlemen, there's been a fantastic energy in this hall tonight. It's been terrific to be here and to be part of it. We need to take that away tonight and build on it. I do firmly believe that yes, Scotland is going to win, and I do believe that we're going to win in Glasgow. With your help, we will definitely win in Glasgow. This, as other speakers have said, is a broadly based campaign, a very broadly based campaign. The movement for independence is not to be understood in terms of the difference between right and left, but the difference between right and wrong. And that's the difference on which this campaign is based. All of us involved in Yes Scotland feel an enormous sense of pride and privilege at being part of this campaign. I have always liked the saying that the best way to predict the future is to create the future. Please, all of you tonight, go away tonight and help us to create that future, an independent Scotland. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Participation sheet, mention the ward you live in. Yep. Take it to that ward. Thank you very much indeed. Thanks.